Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Joining me now in GB News' Westminster studio is royal biographer Tom Bower and my panel, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and the historian and broadcaster, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. To you first, Tom Bower. This is seismic.
Oh, absolutely sensational.
This is absolutely huge.
Without precedent. And it really is the signal that the King realised that the monarchy is fighting for survival. I think in the court of public opinion, there's so little sympathy for, not only for Andrew, but also for the whole way the royal family has handled over the last 6 years the Andrew problem, that he had no alternative but to do the ultimate nuclear option of consigning him to oblivion.
He's often to be known as, straightforwardly, Andrew Mountbatten. I got my names here, thank you. He's going to be called from now on, losing that name altogether, Mountbatten Windsor. Which
well, yes, I think the real essence of it is that from now on he should be invisible. I mean, I think what the King now expects is that Andrew will no longer appear ever in public. There'll be no photographs of him.
Yeah.
He will not be riding through Windsor Park either on a horse or in his Range Rover.
Yeah.
And he will literally be forgotten. I mean, that is the purpose of today's operation.
And what's happening here, he's no longer called Prince Andrew. He also loses other titles. Of course, we know he's not called... Well, he's losing the Duke of York, the Earl of Inverness, Baroness Killerley, and the style His Royal Highness. He's also...
Well, he lost that from the Queen.
Yeah. Yeah.
He lost that originally.
That's gone already.
But I mean, I think what's triggered all this is that the King feared not only the wave of public opinion, but also the threat of a debate in Parliament. And that would have been horrendous because there are a large number of Republicans in the House of Commons, and they would have undoubtedly wrecked the compact between the people and the monarchy.
It was being frayed, wasn't it? He also loses the Order of the Garter, the Knight Grand Cross of the Victorian Order. What are these baubles? Are they important?
Of course they're important. They're all part of the tradition and history of Great Britain. They are part of the essence of why we are different to every other country, and very, very important as well. But there's never been a situation in modern times, and not perhaps back in history either, where a member of the royal family has gone on to a television programme and deliberately conspired to lie. I mean, that, in the end, is what it's all about.
And that's been... I mean, he denies wrongdoing. He would deny lying, I expect. But, of course, that's shown by the contact he had with Jeffrey Epstein after the end point, which he told Emily Maitlis on Newsnight.
Exactly.
The word censure leaps out for me from the Buckingham Palace statement. Let's read that again. It says, these censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. That's about Virginia Giuffre. The word censure means expressing severe disapproval, especially in a formal statement. This is a statement of severe disapproval. That's as big as it gets from the King, right?
It is, but, I mean, you've got to remember as well the context as well. Though for the King, this is clearly an emotional moment. It's his brother, his family... And he is a man who really dislikes confrontation. He's a man who, on the whole, has shied away from being nasty to people, in public especially. In private, it was different. But in the end, I think that he also, because he had been bereft of good advisers in Buckingham Palace, let alone in Clarence House for some years, finally the advisers, I also think probably from the Cabinet Office as well, he has been told there's no choice. And he would have had, I think, an amazingly emotional confrontation with Andrew to tell him the game's up.
The game's up, because it had to be. We got wind of something was up, didn't we, in Prime Minister's Questions last week, when Sir Ed Davey asked about should we take some action to look at this lease on Royal Lodge. And the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, came back and said he welcomes all scrutiny of the work of the Crown Estate, which was basically saying yes to that. And I was struck by the night before he'd had an audience with the King, the usual audience. I wonder whether this is part of a conversation.
I would have thought so, but the idea of Ed Davey triggering anything historic, I'm afraid, leaves me absolutely baffled. But, of course, the King would have talked to the Prime Minister about it. That is actually what the weekly conference is all about, and no notes or anything, and he would have been told what the public mood is. And it was just a matter of confronting Andrew with reality.
We understand this was this initiative was initiated by the King Charles, and his brother has not objected.
That's a polite way of saying he had no choice. But what it still leaves, if you don't mind me, what it still leaves, what happens to Fergie? I mean, she's losing her home. The idea of her moving into an estate somewhere on a royal estate is just ridiculous. She's a woman who just can't control her expenditure, but clearly has to be brought somehow under control, as does Andrew.
Now, we're learning more facts as we speak about what's happened about an hour ago. The daughters of the son of a sovereign, that's HRH, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, they retain their titles because of the George V's letters patent of 1917. Can you fill me in on what that means?
I think in the end what it boils down to is this, that why should the daughters suffer because of the sins of the father?
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. And wherever you go in town, people say that they're very decent girls, women now. They have only the best of intentions and they shouldn't be humiliated. And I think that's fair enough.
We understand, we haven't heard yet from Downing Street, but we understand from sources that the government has been consulted and it is seen to be constitutionally proper for the government to be consulted, but equally it's for His Majesty to take this action. And so it looks like the government supports what's happened here.
Well, I think the whole point there is, you see, that the government didn't want to take the initiative. And the whole point last week, when all this blew up after the Mail on Sunday's revelation, that the government and politicians always said, this is up to the palace, this isn't for us to intervene. And certainly it is for the king to decide, because it's not for the government to interfere in royal matters. So I think in that sense, it's proprietary that the king should make the decision. But undoubtedly, he had the advice of the Prime Minister and many others that the position was unsustainable.
Where will Andrew go, do you think? You must be aware of all the different properties the king has on all his sites.
Well, I think it will be very difficult for him to stay in Windsor, because I think very much the force behind this has come from Prince of Wales William and his wife Kate. I think they just didn't want to be neighbours to Andrew.
Because they're moving nearby, aren't they?
They're moving nearby to Forest Lodge, and they didn't want to bump into him. And therefore, that was terribly important to get him out of the way. I mean, the natural thing for him to do would be to exile him to an island in Scotland, into some terrible castle, and make sure he couldn't leave.
It's been reported tonight that Prince Andrew will move to a property on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, and that's privately funded by the king.
Well, there we are. That's it.
And that's of course where the Duke of Edinburgh.
There are a lot of houses on the estate, and that's exactly right.
A long way away from private.
A long way from that, and it's impossible for private photographers or paparazzi to get anywhere near him.
He won't be on his uppers. He'll get an income from the king, we understand.
Well, yes, but I mean, he'll get an income. He won't starve, and nor should he. But the problem really is, although Sandringham has a very good partridge shoot, I can't imagine he'll be invited to that. Yeah. But I think the real problem for him is what does he do? He is a man who seeks publicity. All the film we're now watching of him is always standing in the spotlight. Yes. It's congenitally very difficult for him.
He loves being Prince, right? He loves
exerting himself. It's going to be an amazing shock for him. I mean, how does a man cope? And of course, there will be people tonight who will say he's been punished enough. We've got to look after his health. We don't want some terrible, terrible repercussion of a man going over the edge. So I think now he's done the honest and decent thing, he's accepted this all over, he should now be allowed to disappear without any more recrimination.
His wife, estranged wife, I think they are divorced, but they have a relationship living together. She will make her own arrangements, we think?
No, I think they'll have to find something for her. I mean, she's incapable of making arrangements, and financially couldn't do it either. No. So I think a two-bedroom flat somewhere in Clapham is the right place for her.
Well, I think you're joking there. But surely she wants to be near Andrew. They seem to get on, or don't they get on? I don't know.
They do get on. It's a strange relationship. Of course they'll find somewhere, perhaps in Norwich or something, where she can go. I mean, we can't be so heartless. No. I mean, she, in the end, is the ex-wife. She's part of the family. I'm sure they'll find something suitable for her, on the promise that she also stays quiet and doesn't write a book or anything like that.
Now, we understand from sources that this is all due to the serious lapses of judgment that has been shown by Andrew. And this decision has the support of the Prince of Wales. But as you were implying earlier, he's been a driving force behind it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the great problems has been for Charles, the king, that his son wants a completely different monarchy. He wants to modernise it, he wants to reduce it, he wants to strip it of a lot of the chivalry and traditions which Charles has done his best to nurture. So I think there's a great clash there. But the one thing which is unfortunately always uppermost in our mind is the fact the king is ill. And we don't know exactly the fate of the monarchy.
Well, now, Prince Harry gave an indication in those remarks last year.
And that was a pretty heartless thing to do.
Yes, it was, because it was...
Exactly. But that is the reality. So, and Prince William comes to the monarchy with a different sort of background than his father,
yes,
in all sorts of ways. So I think that what's really happening is that William and Kate have forced the pace on this. The king had no choice. They want very much to be free of scandal. I think they'll do the same to Harry and Meghan. They'll probably strip them of their titles. They want a clean, untrammeled, impeccable monarchy.
Do you put any blame on the late Queen Elizabeth II, who is dear to so many hearts in this country? But should she have been firmer when she had the moment? But it's hard.
I know what you're saying there, and it's easy to blame the parents. Don't we all blame our parents? But the truth is that she was a very, very dedicated monarch. She worked terrifically hard. In those days, children were looked after by nannies. It was a completely different... And the truth is that Charles and Andrew are such different people. And Andrew just was very differently brought up than the others. And it was a terrible mistake, probably, to send him to Gordonston. He should have gone to Eton, and he would have had proper friends, had proper discipline.
Because Gordonston's a harder place to be.
It was ridiculous of Philip's idea that somehow they should all be toughened up. Yeah. That was silly. And therefore, to some extent, of course, you can blame the Queen, but, you know, we can always blame our parents. In the end, nobody forced Andrew to go on to a Newsnight and lie.
Apart from his own vanity, to talk about his put to the palace side. And arrogance. I mean, he thought he could boss around a rather good journalist called Emily Maitlis, and it all went wrong.
He thought he could just lie his way out of it, and that is really why he's being punished, and rightly so.
And where do we put this in the crises our royal family has faced? Well, where does it sit? You've got the abdication, of course. Nothing beats that.
No, it doesn't beat the abdication. I think what it's done is it nipped it in the bud before it's too late, just like the abdication was. He had to go, Edward, because that was the only way to solve the problem. Once he went quietly, but in the aftermath, there were problems. But the problem is, for the king, it's not just Andrew. There's Harry and Meghan out there constantly appearing in the media, constantly making problems. So, you know, it is a very troubled time for the monarchy.
And there could be books in it. There could be
there'll be books in it. I'm writing one. Don't worry. But there'll be books in it. There'll be Andrew and well, he'd have to find a ghostwriter. Of course, he'll be tempted, and that'll be part of the deal. There'll be no income, no home, nothing if he breaks the terms of utter Trappist silence.
He may get some money back from the Royal Lodge he spent on.
Well, I think money is the least of the problems at the moment. I think the most important fact is that Fergie and Andrew must absolutely disappear from view. The whole sensational events must now be buried, and that is the only way for the monarchy to survive.
And just very finally, this is a monarchy trying to save itself in your world.
I believe, you know, the monarchy's popularity has fallen dramatically from it was 80% in favour of the monarchy about 20 years ago, now just barely above 50%. It's a very different country than it used to be. Young people are not that keen on the monarchy. They don't understand. They don't associate themselves with an old king. They might with William, and therefore, you know, it's a huge challenge, and William has got to face it.
And this is the biggest crisis since the Charles and Diana divorce, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely.
30 years.
Absolutely.
Tom Bauer, thank you for joining us. Really good to see you in the studio. Thank you. Turn now to my studio guests, Ellie Wheatley from the Guido Fawkes political website and the historian and broadcaster, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Tessa, to you first. You're a historian. Where would you put tonight's news in terms of ranking and its import to the monarchy?
It should have happened 5 years ago. I mean, the sword of Damocles has been hanging over Andrew's head. Tom was right to cite the initiative for this as coming from William and Kate, almost certainly. They are aware of just how revulsed Gen Z are in particular with the behaviour and the associates of Prince Andrew. Once, no longer we have to call him that, thank goodness. It was such a burden having to pronounce the P It's extraordinary. I mean, there was all this talk about the dukedom and an Act of Parliament being required to remove the Duke of York, and instead it was just in abeyance, his own volition, his vision that he might, set it to one side. But actually the King has always been able to remove the Prince title, and the Queen could have done likewise. But of course, she was always famously said that he was her favourite son. There's huge personal conundrums here for the King. There was a promise to the late Queen that he would look after Andrew. We know that because they don't pay any inheritance tax, the royals going down through the line of succession, therefore Andrew will have been left very little money directly by his mother, but I'm sure that Charles will have acquired the money necessary to look after his brother, which is one of the reasons why he's strategically been put on Sandringham Estate, a private estate, and therefore it will be the private royal money that looks after Andrew.
That word censure in the King's statement is extremely loaded, isn't it? I mean, that is a real moment of kingly displeasure we so rarely see from the monarch.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure the initiative for that came from the generation below. Charles is not a well man. Funnily enough, I was with somebody the other day who saw him just a couple of weeks ago and was struck by how old he looked and vulnerable. And he's a transition monarch. I think probably everyone knows that. It was obvious he was the oldest monarch to succeed to the throne. And William is very aware, married to an outsider, Kate, a commoner, who has her feet much more on the ground. She doesn't have that sort of flatulent entitlement that so many of the aristocrats who married into the family, like Fergie, had. And they're aware that there was a dud floating about in a wedding cake called the Royal Lodge. And the problem wasn't only a hugely personal one for the royal family in this drip, drip, drip of negative press. Awful photographs this week, Harvey Weinstein and Epstein in the garden of the Royal Lodge.
Ghislaine Maxwell too.
Yeah, horrific. It was just really dark. I almost vomited in my own mouth when I saw it, and it was confirmed that it was taken, on the grounds of the Great
Royal
Windsor
Lodge.
Estate. Just disgusting, yeah. And Beatrice's birthday party sort of hijacked by these loathsome men. But beyond that, and in fact, I had an email from a Conservative MP this week saying, could he come and talk to me about royal finances? And I think what draws it into stark juxtaposition is this sort of absolute obsession with this little piece of paper regarding a second home of Rachel Reeves and the kind of scrutiny we subject all our MPs to vis-a-vis the royal family, when you realise nobody, not even MPs, have a clue. And this is about to blow up in the royal family's face, and they're aware of it, which is why they've cut Andrew off. I would say it's probably too late.
And don't forget, next year MPs vote on the new sovereign grant. It applies from 2027. It'll be less because of money spent on Buckingham Palace. I wonder whether that vote next year they had to deal with the Andrew problem before this happened. If I can turn to you, Ellie Wheatley, you're younger than me. I mean, are you generation something or other, Z or whatever you might be? But we've had old people so far. Tess is very young. I'm old, and Tom Bauer's old. And he was saying, wasn't he, that young people are falling out of love with the monarchy. Is that where you are?
Well, not personally. I love the monarchy. I think it's a hugely.
But your friends maybe, or other.
Well, I think they're not so interested in the royal family, particularly since the Queen died. But I think this entire this latest situation it's hugely historical. I think the last prince to be stripped of his princedom, as it were, was actually during World War I. It was Prince Charles Edward for his allegiance to Germany. So this is.
Tessa might know more about that. That's to do with the First World War.
The irony is it's a total confection, Andrew's new name, Mountbatten, Windsor. Well observed. In fact, it was Battenberg originally. Mountbatten was the Anglicanisation of a German name because we were desperately trying to distance ourselves from the royal family that was German. We were
on
fighting.
that point, this name, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, what is that a confected thing? Who are the Mountbatten Windsors?
Well, famously, Prince Philip absolutely livid when he discovered his children were not going to be given his name. Do you remember? He said, "Oh, I'm little more than an amoeba," when the likes of Winston Churchill were
he was Mountbatten, right?
Yes, he was Mountbatten through his very pushy uncle, also with a dubious track record on the sexual frame of things, but that's a different conversation. So Mountbatten, rather appropriate, you could argue.
So why is he called that name doesn't exist until now?
Well, it's sort of lingered in the family because it comes down through Prince Philip's line, and he was incensed that, in fact, one more thing he had to cede to his young wife was the fact he was going to take her name, Windsor, House of Windsor. But Mountbatten's always been in the cupboard, and they've pulled it out of the magic box of tricks, having roundly rejected it in the late 1940s. It's now been stuck on Andrew as a sort of ultimate punishment.
Ellie, what do you make of all this? I mean, yes, where do young people might see it as more drama, more Netflix-style Crown drama, but is it more than that?
I think it's more drama, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the palace was potentially getting ahead of more revelations to come. I mean, he's Andrew, not Prince Andrew. He's had sort of odd dealings with businesses. Indeed, with Epstein, we don't know. There's a lot that's unknown. For example, how much was he potentially paid for consulting with Epstein? Obviously, we don't know. But could there be more? And of course, his businesses with China. For example, he reportedly met with the alleged Chinese spy master during the latest Chinese scandal 3 times. And
also he was hosted in the Royal Lodge, same man.
Indeed. And also, do you remember H6, another alleged Chinese spy? I think his name is Yang Tenbo. So that would not only, if more were to come out on that wouldn't just embarrass the royal family, but it would also embarrass the government. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government had a slight hand in this.
Well, yes, I think, we don't know, I think that timing of last week's royal meeting between the King and the Prime Minister, we'll never know, but that's fine. But it did come the day before. He opened the door to examination of the lease on the Royal Lodge. I think that's...
Yes.
Parliament's been in the background.
The Public Accounts Committee said we want some evidence from the palace by November the 28th on, the total details of why he hadn't paid his peppercorn rent on the Royal Lodge, etc. So there was... Well,
we don't know he hadn't paid it, but it'd be certainly the deal...
It was an odd deal.
Yes.
But it is interesting, isn't it, that we... Really, it's total gloves off when it comes to the royal family, and the lack of knowledge. People who profess to be experts, whether they're historians or lawyers or politicians, don't really crown estate, what release, who can have what house. Hang on a minute, why does Bagshot Park belong to Edward? Forest Lodge, the car park's gone for the dog walkers. It's going to William and Kate. And yet there are 2 big scalped leading lights in the Labour cabinet, one who's gone and one who's under severe scrutiny because they haven't got a piece of paper from the local council. I mean, it's different strokes for different folks if you're royal, isn't it?
But these politicians are making the laws. The monarchy isn't. So
but the monarchy's signing off. But the monarchy's signing off the laws, isn't it?
Let me tell you, as a journalist, it's very hard to get scrutiny of Buckingham Palace because we ask a question, then they ask the palace, they don't help us, and it all falls between different stools.
The opacity which they've survived off, but arguably it will.
We'll wait and see.
It's almost going to cannibalise them. I think eat them from within unless they open the doors and there's a bit more transparency.
Tessa Dunlop, Ellie Wheatley, stay with us. I'm joined now by the Right Honourable Richard Holden, who is a member of the Privy Council. Richard, aren't you?
I am indeed.
You're also a former party chairman of the Tory party and you're a frontbencher in the shadow cabinet. What do you make of this? But when I say Privy Council, that means you are officially an advisor to the King of some sort. Not that you do it all the time, but you are elevated amongst ordinary mortals. What's the Privy Council make of all this?
Well, look, I can't speak on behalf of the Privy Council. There is there's a Lord President of the Privy Council, and I've only met the King once in my when I was made a member of the Privy Council, and he was very gracious. And look, and I would say, this has clearly been a very difficult time for the royal family, and it's also quite clear, that there was moves from certain MPs in Parliament.
The Lib Dems, but not your party. Now, we did ask Kemi Badenoch a few times. She didn't want to go there on the issue of Prince Andrew, but the Lib Dems did. Are you out of touch as a party?
I would on this. I'd say I think it's quite clear that the King has moved, and I think he's moved in because he's seen what's been going on, and he doesn't like it, and I think we should follow his lead on this. I mean, look back to 1917, right? And what happened then? Then you saw. Parliament actually using legislation to strip titles from members of the royal family. In this instance, the King has moved swiftly on his own initiative, and I think that's the right thing to do.
I'm so sorry, he hasn't moved swiftly, but it's been fine.
Too slow?
Yes, far too slow. The rotten fruit has been hanging on the branch for years.
And it risked, Tom Bauer moments ago, before you came here, Richard, said it risked the future. The monarchy has acted to save itself by doing this.
Well, I think the King has acted in exactly the right way. I think removing, there was this sort of talk a while ago about, what exactly would happen, but I think nothing could be more conclusive than the statement we've seen from Buckingham Palace tonight. It's incredibly clear and incredibly direct. correct about what action His Majesty has taken.
And the word censure leaps out for me in that statement. He talks about these censures are deemed necessary, and that suggests real fury on behalf of the king.
I think you can. I think there's always an element of understatement in those
Yes.
in those official statements that you get from Buckingham Palace. Yeah.
And where do we go from here? We're not going to stop talking about Prince Andrew. I'm afraid it's part of the soap opera, and being talked about legitimises the royal family.
Well, I think we will stop talking about Prince Andrew because it's no longer Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
And how will he keep going? We're told there'll be we think there'll be some money provided by the king to keep him going, a private income. We'll never know. We won't see it.
I mean, if he's no longer in public life, he's no longer got those titles and stripped of all of that by the king. I think, as has been suggested, this is the strongest possible signal for him to, continue with his life in total privacy.
And he's done this without the need to impose on parliamentary time. So that's been important for the monarchy to feel it's not imposing on the importance.
Well, there were two, major issues during the last century. One was obviously 1917 and in the First World War. The second was the abdication crisis. Both of which ended up Parliament getting and politicians getting involved. I think it's actually shows that the king is willing to act, without actually having to impose on Parliament, and I think that shows a level of decisiveness.
Yes. This has been done in consultation, GBNews understands, with the relevant government authorities. I presume that's the Lord Chancellor. Is that right? Who is the?
Well, I mean, the king is obviously is primus inter pares.
And who does he speak to in terms of?
I don't know what conversations have gone on, but the cabinet is technically a subcommittee of the Privy Council, and obviously the Prime Minister leads that. So those are important conversations.
And the government's been clear. We're told that it's constitutionally proper for the king to take this action, and it supports what's been happening here. So we haven't yet heard number 10, but as we understand it, the government is behind what's happened here. And you almost feel it's where the mood of the public is too.
I think it's very much so. I think the public is very much behind the actions that the king has taken as well.
And where he goes next isn't clear. He might move to a private property on the Sandringham estate, maybe?
Well, as I said, I mean, he really now is not a public figure, No. There might be public interest, but he is no longer a public figure. And I think the King's made the right call in that direction.
Now, we're just learning now that palace sources have told GBNews that Andrew, as you must call him from now on, remains 8th in line to the throne. And Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has backed the king in his decision to remove Andrew's titles. Sir Ed Davey, who has led the way on this, he said this: "The king is absolutely right to strip Prince Andrew of both his titles and his residence at the Royal Lodge. It's clear," he says, "that Andrew's position had become totally untenable, having disgraced his office and embarrassed the country. This is an important step towards rebuilding trust in our institutions and drawing a line under this whole sorry saga." Is he right, Richard Holden? Do you think this will draw a line? Because Virginia Giuffre's book's out. She's perhaps somebody who we should talk about. This legitimises her complaints, her brave stand she took against the Duke of York as he was, taking him to court, being that person, and then she died by suicide, of course, earlier this year. Has a book, a memoir written, published after she had died. I mean, it really is. It's a moment for her and her family.
Well, I think it's a tragedy, and I think that was also reflected in the statement by the King and Queen today. I think an important to acknowledge that as well. I think the King has done everything he can do to remove Andrew from public life, and I think that's exactly the right course of action.
I mean, Tessa Dunlop, there was increasingly, I thought, a dissonance between the good works that the King and Queen do when they go out and open all sorts of shelters for maybe vulnerable women, and so it goes on, with this poison at the heart of the royal family. And that now appears to have been excised.
What's staggering is the layers of defenestration, the extent and the amount of privilege that was stacked up on Andrew. It feels like there's been this sort of stripping away of his titles, HRH, his honorary military titles, Order of the Garter, the oldest order in Britain. Then, of course, the question of the Duke of York, the title, the Royal Lodge, and now Prince. It is staggering, actually, the extent to which this child, as he was when he was born, the first child to be born to a reigning monarch in Buckingham Palace for over 100 years, and the level of entitlement that comes with that. And I was speaking to somebody at the weekend who's friends with a former private secretary of the Queen, and he said, look, we can't not own that the royal family, the way they're brought up, not only do they go to these rarefied boarding schools, public schools as they're called, but also they have with them a security brief. So they are subjected to generally not only, but mainly men, grown men, sort of hovering around them, often jocular humour, conversations that we wouldn't necessarily expect our children to be privy to, a sort of detachment from reality, always a special status within a school that already gives you a special status. And guess what? That makes you sometimes, some people, susceptible. Andrew's head, it was regularly turned. Apparently he was jealous of Sean Connery's kids because they had more opulence. He had a weakness for private jets.
Ellie Wheatley, what will the younger generation make of this? In a statement from Buckingham Palace, it says that the King and Queen wish to make clear their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. That really means young women, doesn't it? And that is then putting them on the side of young women.
Yeah, well, of course. However, there is the argument that has this come a little too late, because this Epstein scandal has been going on for a long time. I mean, when was that interview with Emily Maitlis? Was it 2017?
2019.
6 years ago. So this has been a growing scandal that's been going on and on for a while. And listen, I think it's right to strip him of all of his titles, but potentially some Gen Z might think, why only now?
And it has been led by journalism, mustn't forget. There's been journalism by the Mail on Sunday most recently.
Actually, as well, a revulsion, a sort of feeling that the tide is turning. They do have a bit of a crisis with the younger generations, their popularity. I mean, we always know that young people are not going to go for traditional symbols like monarchy, but there's actually a hardening of sentiment, like an anti-monarchical sentiment, that I think is pronounced, and that they need to address that.
Just very quickly.
I would just say, it's the Epstein scandal has emerged over a long period of time. We've also seen in that period a former Labour cabinet minister appointed to be our ambassador to the United States by the Prime Minister, knowing full well the connections that he had to that person as well. So I think there's, it's all very well for people to just kick the royal family, but actually there's a lot of, there are broader questions to be asked about those in this government as well.
They will continue to be asked. Richard Holden, thank you for joining us tonight in the studio at GB News in Westminster. Stay with us both, Tessa and Ellie. Now, our next guest is the CEO of campaign group Republic, who had instructed lawyers to consider a private prosecution against Prince Andrew over allegations of sexual assault, corruption and misconduct in public office. The group has long called for the police to investigate and prosecute Andrew and has criticised political response to the scandal as weak, deferential and inadequate. Joining me now is the CEO of Republic, the campaign group against the monarchy, Graham Smith. Graham Smith, thank you for joining us. Your reaction, please.
Well, again, it doesn't go too far enough. I mean, they simply don't get it. This Andrew is not accused of being friends with a criminal. He's accused of offences, committing offences himself. And the only reasonable response to that is a proper, serious police investigation where he is taken to a station and interviewed under caution, where all the evidence is looked at in detail.
Oh, yes, I may have lost you there, Graham Smith, but that's right. I mean, is this a moment, if I can say, I mean, do you think this is a good result for the monarchy, for a Republican group like yourselves? How do you react to this? I think I've lost Graham Smith there. I've lost Graham Smith there from Republic. We'll try and get him back as soon as we can. And we can go now, I think, to Jenny Bond, who's the former BBC royal editor. Jenny Bond, you're an experienced royal watcher. You know these people. You know Prince Andrew. You know Prince Charles. How will they be feeling tonight? What's the feeling inside the family?
Well, I'm not party to what's the feeling is inside the family, obviously, but I think there will be a feeling of some relief. at the palace that they have made this very decisive action. I mean, it is extraordinary. I've been reporting, as you say, for a very long time on the royal family, more than 3 decades, and this is a crisis beyond anything that I've reported on before, including Diana's death. And this is the most ruthless and decisive action I've ever seen a member of the royal family take. King Charles is not a ruthless man, but this, you have to say, is ruthless action. To take the title of prince away from his brother and to demand that he leaves the royal lodge, which he had a pretty secure tenancy on, has surprised me, I have to say. I came in this evening to this news and I was gobsmacked. But I think that the clamour from the public, from the press and from Parliament now, many members of Parliament saying something had to be done. The sanctions thus far were not sufficient. I think the King heard that, and I think also when he was out earlier this week and heard a member of the people who were around, the crowd around him, heckling him about what he knew about Andrew, that was really one step too far.
Of course, they were caught on camera on a visit to Lichfield, I think, from memory. Yes, one word leapt out at me from the statement was the word censure, which censure means to express severe disapproval of someone, especially in a formal statement. I mean, that really is, this is the very, very angry, cross and disappointed king.
Yes, and I think this all began totally unravelling when Andrew was exposed as a liar, when it became clear that he had lied about, on Newsnight, that infamous interview, about how long he had continued his relationship, his friendship with Andrew Epstein. And I think to have a senior member of the royal family, working or not, as a proven liar was just beyond the pale. And it's gotten worse from there. I think the palace hoped that taking the dukedom or persuading Andrew to say he was relinquishing his dukedom, the palace probably hoped that might be sufficient, but it clearly was not. And they are listening to public opinion. And I think William here is a mover. I think behind the scenes he has been pressing for more action against his uncle. It was an untenable situation, I think.
Yes.
And I'm very pleased that the palace have acted and censured him so publicly.
And driven by journalism, driven by reporting in newspapers. It's quite interesting how that's led the way, and that's almost funneled the frustration and the fury amongst members of the public. We see how far down the charts of popularity Andrew is.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I dislike my own profession, and I think that we hunt like a pack of dogs and we bring our prey down, and sometimes it's quite unpleasant to witness. And I have to confess that over the weekend I did think, you know, is it more than, you know, one man can bear? Are we correct in this? But I think we have been. I think we have, the media, been reflecting public opinion and public absolute disapproval.
You are right to say that there was the flickerings of sympathy, and it's hard to say that really, but there were flickerings in some quarters because he can't answer back. So he's stuck with we're just getting pelted by columns and articles in the press.
Yes, but he could have answered back. He could have publicly said, look, I was on that island, I was at the mansions, I was on the plane with Epstein. This is what I know. I want to do what I can to help the women who have been abused by Epstein, who I knew longer than I said I'd known. He could have said that. So he wasn't without a voice, but he chose not to use his voice.
And indeed, the King and Queen said these censures are necessary really because he continues to deny the allegations against, or notwithstanding that fact, but it's linking the fact that he set his face against all the evidence that was piling up against him.
Oh, yeah, well, he is entitled to protest his innocence. And who knows, perhaps he is innocent, but he has not taken the opportunity to express the sympathy that he needed to for the women who have suffered so grievously at the hands of Epstein. And tonight, Virginia Giuffre's family have been saying that they regard this clearly as a victory for Virginia, who sadly took her own life, as people remember, back in April.
Absolutely. I'm struck by when you ranked it as more a bigger, well, how would you say, a crisis or a moment for the monarchy than the death of Diana in 1997?
Yes, I think it is. I think it has been. I mean, if you think about even we could even go back to the abdication in 1936. Edward was at least Edward VIII who abdicated and left the throne for the love of a woman, not because of any accusations of abuse or anything, but he was allowed to keep his dukedom, allowed to keep his titles. To have someone stripped of his birthright, he was born a prince, he is no longer a prince. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yes, and we were always told, of course, we thought we understood that you are born a prince and that stays with you. You are a prince all your life. And this appears now not to be the case.
Well, not if your brother, who happens to be the king, issues letters patent, which he will have to do, I understand. This is completely outside my realm, I have to say. It's never happened in my lifetime, but there is a mechanism, and the king is going to use that mechanism to dethrone is not the right word, but deprince his brother.
Goodness gracious. And he's losing a lot of the things he held dear. The Order of the Garter. These are baubles given by personal gifts from the monarch. They won't mean much to many people, but they matter to him, don't they, to Andrew?
Well, they have done. He is a man who is very very struck by status and very keen on his status. He always has been. I mean, we are told that he has gone along with this willingly, but this is going to be a very, very bitter pill for him to swallow. I don't know what he'll do with the rest of his life. He'll go to Sandringham. I imagine he'll stay at Wood Farm, which is very close to Sandringham House itself. It's a very nice house. It's where the Duke of Edinburgh the late Duke of Edinburgh spent many months of his final years up there. It wouldn't be a bad life. But, I mean, my own view is that Andrew and Sarah are grown-ups. They have money. Of course they have money. In anyone else's world, our worlds, of course they've got money. And they should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They shouldn't actually be looking to big brother or big ex-brother-in-law to keep them. But Charles is not an unkind man, and he is going to, it would seem, take care financially, at least, of his brother from his own private funds.
Yeah. Jenny Bond, thank you for joining us tonight on a night of high royal drama. Thank you. Now, some breaking news. The family of Andrew's main accuser, Virginia Giuffre, have said in a statement that today she declares a victory. Of course, Virginia Giuffre died by suicide earlier this year. So today she declares a victory, and that she brought down a British prince with her truth and her extraordinary courage. The statement given to the BBC read this: today, an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, our sister, a child when she was sexually assaulted by Andrew, never stopped fighting for accountability for what had happened to her and countless other survivors like her. Today, she declares a victory. We, her family, along with her survivor sisters, continue Virginia's battle and will not rest until the same accountability applies to all of her abusers and abettors connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. OK, I'm going now to Graham Smith, who is the head of the CEO of Republic, which is the anti-monarchist organisation. Graham Smith, thank you for joining us. Sorry the line fell away earlier. You were just giving us your reaction to the news today about this defenestration, you might describe it, of Andrew.
Well, I'm going to say that Jenny Bond and parts of the media and the royals are going to have a pretty rude shock if they think that this is in tune with public opinion. You know, the polling that we did with Savanta last week said that taking titles away is not enough. They think, a clear majority think that the royals knew about these allegations long before they were made public. A clear majority want an inquiry into what they knew and when. And a clear majority, I think it was something like 77%, think that Andrew should face police prosecution. You know, this whole thing about titles and houses is completely missing the point. And if they think this is going to go away because they've done this, then they're going to get a very rude shock.
So what more do you want the king to do, Graham Smith?
Well, you just read out the statement from Virginia Giuffre's family in which they repeated the accusation that he sexually abused Virginia. You know, if you are accused of sexual abuse, you don't have your title taken away. We didn't tell Paul Gadd that he could no longer call himself Gary Glitter. We prosecuted him and he ended up in jail.
So what you want then, what you want then is Andrew to be prosecuted.
Well, he should face a very serious police investigation, and if the evidence stacks up, he should, of course, be prosecuted. I mean, there should be no question about it. And this whole debate over the last couple of weeks has been completely surreal, talking about, will he live in that big house or that big house? Will he have that title or that title? He has been accused not just of sexual offences, but also corruption in public office by, a number of allegations that came out of Andrew Lowney's book a couple of weeks ago. And then last weekend accused of trying to corrupt a police officer, trying to get dirt on Virginia Giuffre. There's a wealth of accusations here, and this really ought to end up in court. And any discussion that, I think that royal correspondents and royal commentators live on another world sometimes, because, the public are not thinking that these titles are important. The public don't have silly titles, don't have the choice of massive houses. What they want is the same that everybody else gets if they commit a crime, which is justice. And what was worrying in that poll is that most people think that the royals are not equal in law. And that is appalling in a democratic society. We should all be equal in law. But I think that the police are very wary of investigating the royals, and that needs to stop. So the government and the royals need to make it abundantly clear that they should not be wary.
But Graham Smith, just finally, surely you must applaud the King taking decisive action, censure against his brother, taking away him being called Prince Charles, removing various baubles he's been given. This is a degree of punishment, isn't it? I mean, the police so far, the police have not investigated. Scotland Yard have not investigated.
Right, but this is not a punishment. I mean, he will find it punishing. He'll be upset about it. But this is not how we respond to serious accusations of criminality. It is a farce. And what William and, when Jenny Bond was talking about William and Charles taking a firm line and all the rest of it, what they're doing is protecting themselves. They're putting distance between Andrew. And they've been doing this since 2011 when the scandal first came out. And it's always been step by step, drip free, we'll take this away from, we'll take that away from, when it's blown up in the press. They've never taken a principled stand and said, clearly there's something wrong. Police, you ought to feel completely free to investigate this, and we will cooperate and tell people what we knew and when. They've never done that. So this claim today that the thoughts are with the victims first and foremost rings hollow, because they have protected Andrew in order to protect themselves for the last 20 years.
Graham Smith, the CEO of Republic, thank you for joining us tonight on a night of high drama on GBNews. Joining me now is the man who knows it all. It's the royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, what an extraordinary evening it's been. Your reaction, please.
Well, Chris, I mean, this is unprecedented and absolutely extraordinary. And also, I think it is probably the strongest action we have ever seen from King Charles III. And in fact, perhaps in living memory, this is the strongest action we have seen from a sovereign against a member of his own family. And I mean, you just look at the YouGov opinion polls earlier on today, 91% of the British public have a very distasteful or a very negative even opinion of Prince Andrew. And I say Prince Andrew, but of course that is no longer what he is being known as. He is going to be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, because the King has begun the formal process to strip the title officially from Andrew, his younger brother. So just to recap, for those of you who are just joining us, Buckingham Palace confirmed this evening that the formal notice has been served for Prince Andrew to not only get rid of all of his titles, but also he is going to be moved out of Royal Lodge to a property on the Sandringham estate. Now, that is significant because the Sandringham estate is owned privately by the Mountbatten Windsor family. So it's not publicly owned. It's not owned by the state in the right of the crown. This is purely a Windsor family property, which means, of course, that no taxpayers' money is being used to fund Prince Andrew's living arrangements. It was coming privately from the King, which gets rid of the question, perhaps, or Parliament even, probing into the affairs of Prince Andrew, a disgraced member of the royal family, who's not only been accused of having sex with a 17-year-old girl on 3 separate occasions, of course, allegations he denies, but also his links with Jeffrey Epstein. And from what royal sources are telling me tonight, Chris, it is the poor lack of judgment that Prince Andrew has had over the last 20 years or so that has led us to this point. So I understand the King made the decision with full support of the Prince of Wales and, of course, the British government as well.
And just finally, what was the trigger on this, Cameron? Was it the reporting at the weekend, the Mail on Sunday finding other contacts post when we thought they had last spoken together, Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew? Is that what it was, or was it and then that led to concern about Royal Lodge, and so it goes on?
Well, I think it was a number of things, Chris, to be perfectly honest. I think constitutionally the biggest problem was that Parliament, or a parliamentary committee at least, was starting to probe into the inner workings of the Crown estate, and that potentially could have led to a Pandora's box situation, because where would they have stopped? Was Prince Andrew going to be the only Royal Lodge residence they're going to look at, or were they going to look at some of the others as well? I think the other point was that, of course, it was overshadowing the actual work of the royal family. We saw the King heckled in Lichfield earlier this week, where a member of the Republican movement was shouting at the King, asking him how much he knew about his brother's links to Jeffrey Epstein. But of course, Prince William is in Brazil next week for his Earthshot Prize, and speaking to sources very close to him, I mean, they are beyond livid and they're beyond frustrated that Prince Andrew is still continuing to overshadow the works of the royal family. So I think it was a combination of factors. And of course, earlier this week, last week even, we saw that Buckingham Palace, or Prince Andrew, agree no longer to use his HRH title, but that didn't quite cut the mustard with the public, which is why we're seeing such drastic action from the King tonight. And I think the message really from Buckingham Palace is this is the King wanting to be as strong as possible, and also the statement saying that the King and the Queen both are very sympathetic to the abuse suffered by victims at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. That is something that Prince Andrew has had on a number of occasions. He could have said that, and he never did.
No. Cameron Walker, thank you for joining us tonight. Of course, GBNews' excellent royal correspondent. Let's bring in the panel. Still here with me, senior reporter Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and the historian and broadcaster Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Tessa Dunlop, where are we then tonight? It looks like there's some decisive action. Republic say go further. We'll see how the polling plays out this weekend. The King has taken decisive action here to punish his brother.
He's severed a leg, hasn't he? Basically, he's kind of brought down the axe as far as he feels he's able to. Is there still blood in the water? I think there are bigger questions. It was interesting listening to Graham Smith of Republic, clearly with his own agenda, wants to see the monarchy got rid of entirely. It's worth bearing in mind that payoff, unquantified amount, is thought to be about £12 million that the late Queen paid to get Andrew off the legal hook in regards to the civil case that Virginia Dufresne brought against him. £12 million that she took, it's believed, from the Duchy of Lancaster, which she receives the profits from, and now King Charles does, tax-free. And I think these questions of taxation and transparency won't entirely go away. I think this is a watershed, and I think that you will see a sea change.
And Ellie Wheatley, the sovereign grant's up for grabs again. It's voted on again next year by MPs. That could have been a flashpoint if Andrew had been around.
Totally. I think that's why the King decided to make this decision today. He was getting ahead of that. He was potentially getting ahead of further revelations. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. And listen, you know, one bad apple doesn't mean that we should get rid of the monarchy at all in general. I think it's really important that we have the Crown and Parliament separate. And it's important in British life in general, and it brings us, you know, we're distinct from the rest of the world with that. We had Trump coming over here for the state visit a couple of weeks ago, and that played an important part in relations with the US and the UK.
You just got a crown from South Korea. I feel a bit outdone. They need to be a bit rich, don't they?
It's still a very important thing to play in terms of general negotiations with the rest of the world.
The detail is so interesting. Apparently he won't have to... He was born Prince Andrew, and he goes henceforth from today as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I mean, this is... It is. The detail is fascinating.
There is a particular pain, and I think it's always a long-term conundrum for royals. You know, the pleasure you get, the rags from riches tale, that, you know, I came from low beginnings and look where I've got to, you know, I made it off my own back. And they can never say that, can they? But to fall, I mean, that is... It's one thing to hold the line, but actually to slump so catastrophically is horrific. It's in the polling, 91%. There is a hardcore 9%. You go out into the Shire counties, people of Andrew's generation are feel a bit sorry for the old boy. Back in the day, we could do what we liked. What?
I'll just mention this because yesterday there was a YouGov poll that showed that actually Starmer's government was more unpopular than Prince Andrew. Just saying. 13%
today
approve of Andrew, and
I
know 12% approve of Starmer's government.
Rachel Reeves is delighted.
Well, we would have been talking about her
thank you note to Prince Andrew. Oh no, Andrew. A thank you note to Andrew.
Well, what an extraordinary evening. I mean, this will echo down the generations, won't it? You're a historian.
Yeah,
Tessa?
it will. I don't think it's going to go away. I think we will see some of the opacity knocked through and questions being asked.
And Ellie Wheatley, the next generation, your generation, might look more favourably on the royal family.
Well, I think so. You know, they've got rid of the bad apple, and let's just hope Prince William and Kate do a good job.
OK. Ellie Wheatley and Guido Fawkes, and of course Dr Tessa Dunlop, thank you for joining us tonight on a dramatic State of the Nation programme. Up next is Alex Armstrong. He's in for Patrick Christis. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Christopher. Well, what a show we've got lined up for you tonight. Of course, we're going to be talking about that breaking story about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, no longer Prince. Is it a new dawn for the monarchy? Is this the kind of tough monarch we want to see in King Charles? Of course, in the news, we're going to be talking about Rachel Reeves and her letter. We'll be digging into that. I've got some very interesting information on that one there. And are we headed to a new Cold War? Trump is talking up nuclear weapons again. All of that and more to come at 9 o'clock.
It's the final week to see how you can become our biggest winner this year. First, you could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxury vehicle comfortably sleeps 4, has its own fitted kitchen and bathroom areas, and comes complete with fitted awning and bicycle rack. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only.